Ever think about what would happen if, like, something truly catastrophic happened in D.C.?
I mean, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, something that would completely disrupt the government.
Right.
Well, the U.S. military, they actually planned for that. They run these super secret training missions called continuity of government operations.
Yep.
But what happens when those training exercises, those drills, for the absolute worst case scenario, end up causing, well, a real-life tragedy? That's what we're diving deep into today. The tragic helicopter crash near Washington, D.C. on January 29th, 2025.
Right.
67 lives lost. A Black Hawk helicopter collided with a passenger jet, a CRJ-700, and nobody survived.
Tragic.
We're talking members of the Boston Skating Club, a group of hunters, students, families, just everyday people on that passenger jet.
Right.
Plus the soldiers on the Black Hawk.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack, so let's start with what we know for sure.
Okay.
The Black Hawk was part of this continuity of government operation like we were talking about. It was a nighttime training mission. And for whatever reason, it ended up in the path of that CRJ-700 near Reagan National Airport.
Right.
Now, what's really strange is that this Black Hawk, it wasn't equipped with something called TCAS. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System.
Right.
It's basically a radar system that helps pilots avoid collisions,
Like it warns them if another aircraft is getting too close.
Exactly, yeah. It can even tell pilots how to maneuver to avoid a crash.
So why wouldn't a military helicopter, especially one flying near a busy airport at night, have this?
Well, you see, it's standard on commercial airliners, but military aircraft, especially those on sensitive missions, sometimes they don't have it.
They want to stay under the radar, literally.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
In these continuity of government operations, they're simulating, a chaotic scenario where they might need to operate undetected.
So they're prioritizing secrecy over safety.
Well, it's more complex than that. They have to weigh different risks.
I guess so, but you got to wonder, if that Black Hawk had TCAS, could this whole thing have been avoided?
It's hard to say for sure. TCS would have alerted the crew to the presence of the CRJ-700.
Right.
But whether they would have had enough time to react, that depends on a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, the speed of both aircraft, their trajectories, the actions of air traffic control.
Speaking of air traffic control, the reports mentioned that Reagan National was understaffed that night.
Oh, really?
19 controllers instead of the usual 30. Could that have been a factor, you think?
Oh, absolutely. DC's airspace, it's like a giant, complicated highway in the sky.
A lot of traffic.
Tons of it. And those controllers, they're responsible for guiding everyone safely, making sure nothing collides.
So fewer controllers means more stress, more workload.
Yeah, exactly. It can lead to communication delays, mistakes. It's a lot to handle, especially at night.
It makes you wonder, how often does this kind of understaffing happen? And is it worth the risk?
It's a question we need to be asking, especially considering this isn't the first Black Hawk crash we've seen.
Yeah, it's really unsettling. The sources said there have been 47 service members killed in Black Hawk crashes since 2014. 47. That's a lot of lives.
Yeah. It definitely raises concerns about the safety protocols, the training, everything.
Right. And the Pentagon, they did ground Army pilots after a similar incident in Kentucky back in 2023. But this recent crash, well, it shows that maybe those measures weren't enough.
Yeah, they might need to take a closer look at the long-term solutions, what needs to change to prevent these tragedies from happening again.
Exactly. And while all of this is going on, the NTSB and the FAA, they're conducting their investigation. They were able to recover the black boxes, which is, I guess, good news.
Definitely. The black boxes, they're like a plane's version of a memory.
Okay.
They record everything that happens during flight, the pilot conversations, the altitude, speed, engine performance, even the weather conditions.
So investigators can piece together exactly what led to the crash.
Exactly. They analyze all that data, try to find any mechanical failures, pilot errors, anything that might have contributed to the accident.
It's like solving a puzzle, but with incredibly high stakes.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about all these technical details, we can't forget about the human cost of this tragedy.
Of course.
We know the names of two of the soldiers on board the Black Hawk.
Yeah.
Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara and Chief Warrant Officer 2 Andrew Lloyd Ives.
Yeah.
And the family of the third soldier, they've asked for privacy. But it's impossible not to think about the families of all 67 victims. the grief they must be going through.
Absolutely. And not just families. This has affected entire communities.
The skating club, the hunters, the students, all those people who are on that plane.
Right.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
So where does that leave us? We've got this incredibly complex accident, a lot of potential factors at play. The lack of TCS, the understaffing at air traffic control, the training protocols for these continuity of government operations.
It really makes you think about how we balance the need for these types of exercises, the preparation for national emergencies with the safety of everyone involved.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
Yeah, and it's a conversation we need to have. How do we make sure something like this never happens again?
Exactly. How do we prioritize safety in the skies above our nation's capital? And, how do we honor the memory of those 67 lives lost? It's a question we all need to be asking.
Absolutely.
And maybe, just maybe, by asking these tough questions, we can prevent another tragedy like this from happening again.
Hopefully.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And remember, keep those questions coming. Keep digging deeper. And let's all work together to make our skies a little bit safer.
Absolutely.